Today is Wednesday, November 28th, and this is Celtics Beat on the CLNS Media Network, the leading online provider of audio-video coverage of the Boston Celtics. I'm Adam Kaufman. Episode 291, featuring longtime Boston Globe columnist Bob Ryan, is brought to you by Action Heat. That's actionheat.com/Boston, or use the coupon code BOSTON at checkout to save 20%. Show also brought to you by The Athletic. Go to theathletic.com/CelticsBeat to get a monthly subscription for less than $3 a month. First, welcome in on a Wednesday. Thanks for being flexible on the change from our normal Sunday. About a long break between Monday's game in New Orleans and Friday's home date with Cleveland. Seemed like a good time for all of us to kind of take a deep breath, regroup, assess where things stand with the Boston Celtics. 11-10 after a 2-1 trip. Mostly healthy, though guys like Jaylen Brown, Terry Rozier, Gordon Hayward, Al Horford, they've all been dealing with soreness of some kind or another. But again, very healthy compared to last year. And a quarter of the way through the season, 6th in the Eastern Conference. And as we know, underachieving. Like most of us, Marcus Smart had no answers after a disappointing defeat in Dallas back on Saturday.
Words can't even explain it. It feels like deja vu all over again. Like we keep saying and doing the same thing after every game, and it's getting real annoying. I mean, I don't even know what to say to you guys at this point.
I had a thought, like many of you. We're the gritty Celtics, the hard-nosed guys who win or lose always try. That, if nothing else, has been a staple under Brad Stevens since he arrived. He gets the most out of his guys, they work their asses off, and they overachieve. Smart flat out admitted that has changed this year when asked what's causing this group's inconsistency.
Just lack of effort. Lack of fear. Like we don't impose our fear and will on other teams. Last year, teams used to when they came in and they played the Celtics, they knew they were in for a fight. This year, teams, they can't wait to play us, and that's a problem. And when, like I said before, when guys aren't scared of you anymore, there's nothing you can do about that. We got to change it.
One guy that has a chip more than anybody else on his shoulder, not Kyrie Irving talking about needing more veteran leadership, which is absurd, not Jaylen Brown talking about winning 5 of the next 6 championships, or any of the other guys who have bought into their own hype since LeBron James left the East and a pair of All-Stars returned to the lineup. All-Stars entitled, by the way. We all know Gordon Hayward, not an All-Star this season, may not play like one all years. He works his way back from last season's injury. The guy I'm talking about is the longest tenured member of the team and also one of the youngest players on the club. Yes, the guy you just heard, Marcus Smart. Plenty of people have made a case for him to start this year, and Brad Stevens made that move before the game against the Pelicans, and it paid off. Smart played 40 minutes, season high, most minutes he has seen since the 2017 playoffs in a single game. And his toughness, energy, effort, defensive prowess, intensity, call it what you want, he was a game changer, and it worked very nicely alongside Irving as well.
I'm just trying to come in and do what I do, bring the energy from the get-go instead of coming off the bench and waiting, and trying to get us to a better start.
Marcus brings and Baines, they bring such a level of grit to our group. And I think that I wanted to see what that would look like with Marcus in the starting lineup. We won't be settled on a starting lineup until forever.
That was Brad Stevens, and the 0% chance you don't know that. You can always find C-Sound on the CLNS YouTube page, so I encourage you to go check out pregame, postgame, practice videos, everything there, a whole bunch of analysis, different podcasts. It's terrific, and there are thousands, tens of thousands of subscribers to that page. You should be one of them. But the last thing Steven said right there, we won't be settled on a starting lineup till forever. Why? Well, because what they've been doing hasn't been working. Don't be surprised if Smart goes and starts again on Friday, even if Jaylen Brown is back. And he should. Roll with Marcus Morris, too. Balance it out. Brown, Hayward, Baines on the bench. Let's go. But this show, it's not designed to recap or preview any single game, so let's bring in longtime Boston Globe columnist Bob Ryan, a man who has forgotten more about basketball than I will ever know, for his evaluation of this team, expectations, the future, individual and collective disappointments. There's a lot to cover with Bob. You know him from his own podcast, too, Bob Ryan's podcast on the CLNS Media Network. Bob, can I start here letting people behind the curtain a little bit, talking about our text exchange when I asked you to come on the show?
Oh, if you insist.
All right. Well, I think it's, I think you're like a lot of people, quite frankly. I said that we'd be focusing on the team. You said you're disgusted. You weren't even going to watch the Pelicans game because you're just waiting for them to wake up. What's rubbed you the wrong way?
shouldn't be. I don't think they need new players. They have to play better. The worst fears about having too much talent with too many people needing time or wanting time are being realized, I think. And now I just don't buy this notion suddenly, they're just not that good. No, what they did last year in the playoffs showed that there was talent, abundance of talent, even over and above Kyrie Irving and Gordon Hayward. It's not working out the same this year. The worst fears about Rozier appear to be coming true. The worst fears about... And then Jaylen Brown's curious regression, I don't know how much of that is tied to whatever feelings he has about playing time or stylistically with Hayward being back. I don't know. It's funny, the one guy I worried about the most has been the least problem at all, Marcus Morris.
Yeah, likewise.
I worried the most about him, and yet he is. But because Hayward's not ready by far to assume a major role, Morris has still gotten his minutes. But I just worry. I'm angry. It shouldn't be this way. And you know, the defense has not been good. The shooting is. You know, they had that one fool's gold game against Milwaukee.
Right.
And oh, God, I hated that. No, of course, you know, I'm philosophically opposed to the three in the first place, but I have to grudgingly live with it for the rest of my life. And I'd do away with it in the next 7 seconds if I could. It's distorted the game and changed it and made it a less appealing game for me. But nonetheless, I'd rather a minority opinion.
No,
but
you know, not to cut you off, but let's go there, and then we'll come back to the team, because okay. I was going to bring this up anyway, because I know you feel that way, and I do as well. And a lot of the time, you know, people will tease me on Twitter because I'm like Grandpa Simpson yelling at a cloud, because I hate the style of play. I genuinely do. And it's not just the Celtics. We know that. It's the entire league. But plowing into the paint just to kick it out for a three, passing up opportunities inside for open looks outside over and over and over. And I understand the logic behind the percentages and what's driven the change and all of it, but it's just, it's not for me. And quite frankly, for Boston, it's a large part of why they're struggling to get to the free throw line. And we know they're having the lack of success just hitting open shots in general, but it's not an entertaining brand of basketball unless you have those nights that you're hitting 18 or 19 from distance. But even like Monday against the Pelicans, when they did do that late and they got hot, it's still not all that great to me. I'm not like you to the extent where I would just do away from the three. I don't want it to be around. But, I mean, my era growing up was back in 80s and 90s basketball where you had the existence of the three-pointer and it was a part of the game, but it wasn't live and die by the three like it is now.
No, it gradually took on a life of its own. Even in the height of the ABA, it was never as dominant as it's become here now. And again, give the guys credit. They can make these shots, and people are trained to make these shots from high school on. I understand that. And people can make themselves into three-point shooters. It happens all the time. My greatest example living is Brook Lopez, who went from being a low-post center to taking more threes than anybody on his team 2 years ago in New Jersey, and he hasn't stopped taking them since. We understand that. You're right. How much, I'll throw this back at you. How much would you pay to see Kevin McHale play again? I know I'd pay a lot.
Yeah, I mean, look, people
like
don't. People don't even recognize that he's one of, if not the greatest power forward of all time. People just it doesn't even cross the minds of people now.
No, I mean, to see that kind of footwork and that kind of up and under stuff and that kind of dexterity in the low post and that kind of, oh my God, to see Kevin McHale in the first 3 months of this 86-87 season was the greatest low post playouts ever seen, ever. And then he got hurt. He got stepped on by Larry Nance, and it changed his whole career. He was never the same again. But he was unbelievable. He scored 20 points every game right until the middle of January that year. Anyway, I want a balance. I have the three, but we need a balance. I mean, anyway. Yeah, it's what I'm not as. I don't like the game as much as I once did. I just can't. It's like baseball. I love baseball. I still love it more than anything in sport, but I don't like it the way it's evolved and the pitching thing, the romanticism of a complete game and all that. It's all gone. Well, let's go. But it's the same idea. But the basketball thing, back to that. No, I don't like the three. It distorts the game at every level. And it's not to me the same. It's clearly not the same, but it's not as entertaining a product, and I just can't understand why people are so infatuated with it at the abandonment of low post play, which is a dying art.
Well, and to your point about McHale, I mean, you don't even see Shaq-like footwork anymore, let alone a guy like McHale. And Shaq could just do it with size alone, muscle his way around guys. You don't see any of that because guys are so concerned or able, in large part, to just go out, knock down a three, and so it's all about spacing and the open game and whatever. We could do an entire show on that.
And I'll give you there's a couple guys around that do it, that do have it, but it's a minor part of their game. Embiid can do it. Mm-hmm. Karl Anthony Towns can do it. But you know they're into the and then Davis could do it, I'm sure too. AD, the brow, but they're much more interested in facing up than they're back to the basket. And guys are trained. Guys big men don't want to be big men anymore. You know, no. We got one that is still willing to do it, but he's had to transform himself a little bit too, Aaron Baines. But big men don't want to be big men. They're everybody. You know, all the comedians want to play Shakespeare or vice versa, whatever you want to look at it. And it's. So it's a sameness to the game that I think is evident, but apparently the modern fan doesn't care.
So with this group, this was supposed to, Bob, be a 55-60 win team, maybe at least, that would reach the NBA Finals, represent the East, and maybe compete, hopefully, with the Warriors, but at least get to the NBA Finals, and as much as anything, be as likable a bunch as you would find across sports in Boston. But maybe months down the road they'll finish that way, but right now it's anything but that. If you could drill it down to one thing, two things, I mean, what's changed in your opinion? They're a zillion, I know.
I don't know. See, I can't get inside their heads. Did they read the press clippings? You know, too much. Did we all make assumptions about how easy it was going to be to reintroduce Irving and Hayward into the mix? A mix that worked very well, that liked each other, that had that seemed to have their roles very well defined, and we're happy with it. And there was going to be. We knew there would have to be adjustments made. We mentioned specific people. Rozier, of course, is going to lose valuable minutes that he had gotten used to being a very that relied upon starting point guard, and he delivered in the playoffs. So I worried about I worried about that at the time. To your point of talking about the popularity, last spring, I'm telling you, I live in a hockey town. I mean, it's always been a hockey town, a good high school hockey town. We put out NHL players, and right now, so it's not a basketball town. Although we had our best high school basketball team in the 45 years I lived in the town, but there was more Celtic talk, what I'm going to get to, in the spring as that team was advancing than I had heard since '86. More Celtic talk. People had really attached themselves to that team. There was something likable and lovable about that team last year, and you thought, oh boy, they're going to bring back Hayward and Irving, and it's going to be wonderful. Well, it's not wonderful, and it just shows you that mix and meshing and a willingness to subjugate yourself and playing roles, and it all fit perfectly at the end last year. They just weren't quite good enough. They couldn't beat the King, okay, but I too thought, look, I thought 60 was a reasonable goal for sure this year, and that was factoring in that Hayward might not be fully back until January, which he probably won't be. But I'm really disappointed, and I'm looking at Toronto. I knew they were going to be formidable. Also, that's the other thing that people totally underestimated the competition. Toronto beat them last year, and they still can't beat Toronto. And now Toronto's better with Leonard. Philly, I wasn't too worried about, but suddenly Philly's got Butler, and oh boy, you checking out what he's doing for them? This team's they're looking up to people. They may be looking up to Milwaukee. I mean, in the whole season as well. They messed up a quarter of the season is in the books, and they are one game over 500 as we speak, and that's beyond. It's blowing my mind. It just shouldn't be.
Especially it being one quarter. This team, somebody wrote about it the other day when they were 10-10, obviously a game over, like you said, but in NBA history, only one team has started 500 or worse through 20 games and won a title. That was LeBron's Heat in 2006. What's it going to take, do you think, for you to – you're not going to buy in after one win, certainly, no. But what's it take for you to buy in? What kind of pattern do you need to see?
I need a month. I need a good month. I need a month of winning 80% of their games or something like that. They're going to have 75% of their games to 80. A month of consistently good play at both ends of the floor with good minute and time distribution, with good people playing the way we know they can play. And is it asking too much of it? Now, Rozier apparently needs those minutes, and if that's the case, then what are you going to do? You can't. Now, there's another theory out there, and I'm entertaining it. Okay, I'm not subscribing to it yet.
I think I know where you're going with this, but go on.
The true point guard thing with Irving. He's not a true point guard. We know that. He's a scorer who can pass. He's not a passing first point guard. Not a point guard. He's you know what he is? He's the modern Allen Iverson. And that's what Iverson always was, a two guard who who passed, sometimes reluctantly. I think Irving's heart is in the right place. I like what he says. I think he's been very good. I don't want him to change, but I don't think he should. But he's not a pure point. They actually functioned very well last year when Rozier was a pure point, and he was backed up by a pure point. And Larkin was missed at the end last year. And so maybe that is the problem. A problem. It's not the problem. The problem is from the neck up. I totally believe that. The effort has not been there in channeled the right way. I still think if they can channel their energies in the right way, that they're going to be okay. And then when no matter what they finish, however many wins they get, when you get to the playoffs, we all know it's 0-0 when it starts, and then they could be competitive the way we thought they might be. They should have been. So we'll see. But maybe that point guard thing is an issue. Sometimes you can surmount that depending on who the forward is, and Hayward is a good passer. He's not Bird. It's only been one Bird, but I still think I'm babbling. I think my favorite word, Adam, in talking about team composition is components. Mm-hmm. There's enough components to win to be a very good NBA team, but this mixture has not gelled yet. They just haven't figured it. And I'm not giving up the idea, but that they've frittered away a quarter of a season and put themselves in a position that they should not be in.
We'll get right back to Bob. I want to tell you this episode is sponsored by Action Heat. Action Heat makes the world's best battery-heated clothing. Heat on demand at the touch of a button. Control your environment with Action Heat. Action Heat clothing is engineered to safely and efficiently deliver heat via heating panels similar to a heated car seat. They can reach temperatures of up to 135 degrees and are powered by rechargeable 5-volt lithium-ion batteries that last up to 12 hours on each charge. Action batteries can also be used to recharge your phone or any other gadget while you're wearing them. Perfect for any friend or family on your holiday gift list. Great for anyone who works outdoors, skiers, snowboarders, or anybody that loves the outdoors or hates being cold. I kind of hate being cold. Action Heat clothing provides toasty warmth and comfort for your whole body, including heated jackets, socks, gloves, hats, and more. We've got a special deal for our listeners to save 20% off your entire order. Just go to actionheat.com/Boston to check out everything Action Heat has to offer. That's actionheat.com/Boston or use the coupon code BOSTON at checkout to save 20%. Stay toasty warm while you enjoy all your outdoor activities this winter with Action Heat. All right, let's get back to the show. The true point guard thing is not actually where I thought you were going to go. Where I thought you were going to go is there's sort of I'm not going to say it's a prevailing notion, but there's an increasing chatter that's becoming more of a conversation, if I could frame it that way. It sounds a little ridiculous and feels odd to ask, but I'll do so anyway. Some people believe, hey, does Danny Ainge need to make a move? Does he need to actually clear out some of the talent, like a Rozier, in order to focus some of the continuity a little bit better and better define roles? Does this group need that?
Well, that's a good point, because I did also at the outset say I think they don't have to do that they have the players. They have players who should be able to figure it out. But Danny's, if maybe Danny, who obviously I yield to his judgment, that if he came to that conclusion, I would respect it. Maybe it's insurmountable. Maybe Rozier just can't adjust. Maybe I hate coming back to blaming. I don't want to sound like I'm blaming it all on him. I certainly don't want to do that, because Jaylen Brown's the biggest mystery to me, frankly. I know he's injured at the moment, and I hope he's not seriously injured with that tailbone injury, but he hasn't been the same. And I don't know, once again, if that's somehow indirectly connected to Hayward's presence. I don't know. It's interesting. They certainly have players that out of context that people would want. I mean, he's got the wherewithal to shake things up if he wanted to. And of course, the big prize is sitting out there. He's not going to be traded this year as Davis. Mm-hmm. But with his impending free agency, the Pelicans are going to have to make a decision, at some point. but probably not till after the off season. But and people have been, I know people have been salivating around these here parts for quite a while about the fantasy of having Davis up here, and I can see why you'd want to think about it. He's an extraordinary talent. But
you have to give up a lot to get him, though.
Yeah, you would.
Chris
and,
Mannix keeps calling it, a Herschel
Walker
package.
There, though. The answer is I'm going to be stubborn. I still want these guys. Damn it, you guys, work it out.
Look, I agree with you. This is the group that people want. Yeah, on paper it looks great.
And the Hayward thing. He's just, it's just not back. But I think he can be. I'm looking at Paul George as a model. I'm hoping that he's going to follow the model of George eventually, and make a full recovery. But we all probably ask a little bit too much for him to come right back where he was, and I way too early to make a judgment on what value he's going to have in the course of the season.
Let's look at this, because this is something that I've thought about a little bit more recently. I really wasn't paying attention to the first, say, 10, 15 games of the year, but more so lately, and I spent a lot of time in the offseason talking about it and blabbering on about it, because it really was my biggest worry with this team. It's not the bad second-half defense that we've seen. It's not the wild inconsistency from night to night. It's not even how a role's going to mesh and what a rotation's going to be. My biggest concern for this team before the year, and maybe that stuff is filtered from this, in the past under Brad Stevens, all of these teams that Stevens has had, from the least talented group that acquired all those scrubs from the Nets to where they are now, is that they've worked hard. They've never been lacking effort. They've always outworked teams. At this point in time, though, this is the first time that they've truly, at least on paper, been talented enough to not have to outwork every team every night and can conserve some energy for the playoffs and do what great teams historically generally do and get there and flip that switch. The thing is, this team doesn't have the evidence of being able to flip a switch. It's in many ways still kind of new to each other and figuring each other out, especially with the presence of Hayward, who effectively was not here last year, even though he was kind of in the background. And that question of, are they not as good as we think they are? And I don't know, sometimes it feels like coach speak. Other times I can't help but wonder, and I'm the one rambling here, but I can't help but wonder, is it possible that the fact that this team just doesn't go out and try nearly as hard is just what's biting them? They're used to playing a certain way, and now for whatever reason they're not.
I think you're onto something, and I think that the coach has already, in so many words, expressed that feeling. Going back to the exhibition season, I found it very curious that he chose a verb in describing his feeling about the team in the middle of their dismal, dreary, boring, unimpressive exhibition season. He said, "I'm not impressed." Coaches don't use that word about their own team. Now he's a very, very bright guy with a worldview and a sensibility and education and all that, and he can use the language very well. But I thought that was an interesting choice of words then, and I'm looking back on it now. He wasn't impressed. I think he's so many ways. He's almost said it out loud directly at times that they're not playing hard enough. I think you're absolutely right. And by the way, there's one other person I can't believe. I'm sitting here going, I'm talking about Rozier. I'm talking about Brown. I'm talking about Morris. I'm talking about Irving. Wait a minute. Is there a bigger individual disappointment other than Rozier, perhaps, than Tatum? I mean, I am just so down and disappointed. He's not the same as he was in May, and I think that, and the last thing in the world I worried about with him, because he checked every box last year, starting with attitude, which was A+, and intelligence and court presence, and oh my God, everything you wanted. I mean, and he's not the same player yet so far. Now the Pelicans game, that a little bit more like the Jason Tatum that we remember. Okay, he's got to flip a switch here. Something happened. Maybe he got a little too caught up. I wouldn't have ever thought that was possible with him. But you know what? He's 21 years old. 20, excuse me. He hasn't been 21 yet. He's 20 years old, and he could be a huge factor in terms of turning this thing around when he starts, if he gets back to where he was when we last saw him at the end of last year.
Well, and he had started so well the first, 2-3 games of the year when, people started, this guy's going to average 22 points, which, by the way, going into the season, around where he is right now, and we know he hasn't shot as well as he did last year, but in terms of just the points per game, it's 16 and change, whatever he is, that's where I figured he would be, just because there are only so many points to go around. He wasn't going to be a 20-point-per-game producer on this team with Kyrie Irving, Gordon Hayward healthy and all those guys and everyone looking for their shots. Maybe next year, but not this year. But you're right, the fight, the attack mentality, the go to the hoop, just the confidence that he played with throughout that playoff run as it moved along, especially in that last series. We haven't seen it throughout the first quarter of this year.
This time last year, he was leading the league in three-point percentage, wasn't he?
Yeah.
The whole league.
Mm-hmm.
And was he not leading the league in three-point percentage at this juncture last year?
Yeah, and he's still respectable. He's over 40%, but he's not 50 plus.
And meanwhile, when I think of him, I think of that gigantic first step. First of all, you're right. It's almost as if you say he could go to the hoop any time he wants. Who's going to stop him? What forward's going to stop him from going to the hoop? I think he's got a lot. He can be a lot better overall, and so. I don't want to put all the stuff on the other guy. He's got to play better, but we know it's there. We know, but I think you hit something that was what distinguished them last year. They were a feisty team, and that's another thing. Now, I'm just going to throw this one out there. The nature of the composition of their team, okay, very impressive. I was one of the many, and every outlet that I had an opportunity, every forum I had before the season, whether it was in print or whether it was on a podcast or radio, I was saying, okay, we know that the Golden State has the best four players in any one team in the league. They got the best core four, but nobody's got more players, good players 1 to 10, maybe even 1 to 12 than the Boston Celtics.
Agreed.
And in theory, that still may be true. But you know what? Historically, the best teams in this league, going back to probably the 1946-47 champion Warriors, when you got a starting five in a rotation of three more guys, maybe four, and you got a solid eight, and the last three guys on the team, are nice to practice with, and you don't need 12, except when you get catastrophic injury circumstance, and it's still the best way to have a team is to have a clear-cut starting five and clear-cut subs. This team, mix and match is so pervasive that it sounds good on paper, but this mix just isn't working.
You look at what he typically does in the regular season, what he did do as the playoff series moved along last year, and granted that was out without Irving, it was without Hayward, and those are two huge guys to get back and have healthy, and that impacts your entire rotation. But Brad typically is a guy, he'll throw 10, 11 guys out on the floor in the first quarter of a regular season game, but in the playoffs, he was doing that. He was tightening those rotations to 8, sometimes 9 guys. Now, I guess it becomes a larger question of if everybody's healthy and you have those guys back, who falls out of your rotation. You're not going to give those same minutes to a guy like Shemi Ojale necessarily, but I guess I never viewed depth as being a possible problem, and you do wonder at a certain
I really
point.
believe it can be over my course of 50 years of covering this league that there have been times when coaches it gives you too much opportunity to second guess yourself, and I've seen it not frequently, but I've seen it. It has happened, and I'm telling you that if you check and analyze the best teams over the years, that the preponderance of them, 80% minimum, when at their best, when they had a starting five and a rotation, and the rotation included at least one guy in the next three that was a multi-position player, whether it was guard forward or forward guard or forward center, and definitely a backup point guard or someone capable of doing that. And a specialist, whether that specialist was a drop-dead jump shooter or whether he was a rebounder or a pot stirrer like Rodman was when Rodman was a young player, that kind of thing. Those are the very best teams. But that's all. I'm just saying. And we don't have that kind of team. We have a team with a lot of possibilities, and that can be good in its own way. But I'm telling you that the preponderance of the great teams had a very set rotation.
Brad Stevens said is not committing to anything, and he shouldn't, by the way. What's your ideal starting five, though? Do you keep rolling with?
Before the season, I thought it was evident that it was going to be because
right.
I thought there was
clear as day.
Yeah, it was going to be Horford, Hayward, Tatum, Irving, and Brown.
Yep.
And that because of the versatility factor that Brown had proven, it was kind of it was a hybrid wing guy, hybrid guard forward for the most part, that it would be a terrific defensive team, with the notable exception perhaps of Irving, but and then you had these guys. Then you had Morris, and you had Smart, who I love, and Rozier, and on and go on and on. Brown has played down to expectation, so you can justify starting Morris instead of Brown, and if Brown will accept that, then I don't know. He's got decisions, no question. And then in the Pelicans game, how evident was that we were reminded about how valuable Smart can be. His defense right away in the first period on Holiday. He brings stuff to the table that is hard to find. I'm a very major member of a Marcus Smart fan club. Yes, I understand. I wish he wouldn't crank up those threes at times, but I'm willing to live with it because of what you do get with him and the other stuff he brings that is so hard to replicate.
One more quick break to tell you today's show is brought to you by The Athletic. If you haven't heard about The Athletic by now, you must be living under a rock. These guys have been crushing every element of sports coverage imaginable, whether you're looking for specific local coverage with beat guys, sports discussed under a national lens, or anything in between. You got to make sure you take a look at The Athletic. No pop-ups, no ads, just high-quality content waiting behind every single click. The Celtics beat, stacked with great writers. Jay King, he's been on the show recently. Jared Weiss, he was on last week with Evan Valenti, and others. Absolutely stacked coverage. You cannot get content like this anywhere else. 600, 750 new articles every single week. Who else is pushing out quality content like that? If you haven't signed up, take advantage of this deal because it's not going to last forever. Go to theathletic.com/CelticsBeat to get 40% off your monthly subscription. That's less than $3 a month just by going to theathletic.com/CelticsBeat. Jay King, Jared Weiss, Sam Amick, Shams Charania, and more, all for less than $3 a month. You kidding? Sign me up and sign yourself up too at theathletic.com/CelticsBeat. All right, back to Bob. So we've acknowledged, obviously, the team's personality, for whatever reason, is different. The group is not as tough, no matter the rotations. Most of the groups that Stevens puts out there are not gelling, as well as Marcus Smart and Kyrie Irving played alongside each other last night, and hopefully they continue to. And I, by the way, would continue at this point to roll Smart out into the starting lineup, even over Brown, provided he's back on Friday. Do it. Keep doing it and see what it looks like. Put Brown on the bench and Hayward on the bench, and you have Baines on the bench, and Morris is starting. Balance it out. I'm good with that. Let's try it. But at what point in time, just looking at the first quarter of the season on the whole, and I will preface by saying I love Brad Stevens, at what point does a lot of this have to go back on him?
This is his first real huge challenge. His first year, he had a honeymoon year. He could have gone 1-81, and everybody would have said, everything's fine. We know that they've improved year by year, and suddenly we've hit a plateau. We plateaued. We got a I won't go crisis. We got a major concern that he's got to address. This is a big challenge, so I'm confident he'll figure it out. But the answer is, it's on him to figure this out. That's why they're paying him the big money, as it were. It's been peaches and cream, quite frankly. And he's answered he's done everything for the most part the right way, and with the results are self-evident. We can't ask for any more. They weren't going to win the championship any of these years. I didn't think they were going to win it this year either, because I still thought Golden State was unbeatable in the end, and they may prove to be when they straighten out their internal problems. But this is a big challenge, but I'm rooting for him, and I'm confident, and I have faith in him that he'll figure it out. But absolutely, he has to come back on him. Who else? What's he going to do? He's the coach. He's got to figure it out.
Let's go back to some of the individuals that we've kind of mentioned, sprinkled throughout this show a little bit. Irving, again, has done to this point about what I expected. We talked about Tatum, and Morris has been excellent, and I agree with you. He's the guy that coming into the year that I was most worried about, just in terms of exactly where does he fit, where do his minutes come from. But, Brown, that big jump from year one to year two, and maybe he's in his head, and hopefully, quite frankly, that's all it is. What I fear is that he's not as good a shooter as he was last year, and that he's not, going forward going to be as good a shooter, and that reputation coming out of college saying, hey, the guy can't shoot, that could be a reality. Because, again, we're still talking about a young guy. He's only 21, 22 years old. Is that a worry for you that all this talk in the offseason of those people saying, I wouldn't trade Jaylen Brown to the Spurs for Kawhi Leonard, that those people were crazy? And I was, I think, as I recall, among that group saying that I didn't like the idea of moving him for Kawhi because he was on a trajectory to not be Kawhi, but had a lot of the same characteristics that could be, say, a Kawhi light, possibly. Now, again, this is a guy we're talking about who's potentially coming off the bench for a little while.
Yeah, I'm concerned. I'm disappointed and concerned. I thought that he had arrived and was an acceptable enough shooter, and the other stuff was wonderful, commendable. Yeah, I'm disappointed. The whole package. I'm disappointed. And now we know he's very bright. I sometimes being too bright gets you in the way, almost.
Rondo-esque?
Yeah, if you will, although I don't know, that Rondo business I never bought into, but that's another story for another day. But other the LA people, they sing the same songs. But, all right. Yeah. Anyway, Brown, I'm worried what the deal is. I absolutely agree. I expected him. I thought he was arrived. I just took him as a given. And now, what do we have here? And I don't. It's still. I don't want to give up. I'm not giving up on him, God knows, but it's not coming out the way it did, and I didn't think it was something we'd have to worry about.
Another guy whose numbers are way down, I don't even care so much about the points per game, just the efficiency, shooting percentage, things along those lines, who we've barely spoken about, if at all. I'm not even sure his name's come up yet. Al Horford has not been very good this year. Yeah,
I know. He was a reliable source of a completely stable source of everything. The fulcrum of the offense, the defense, and plus the father figure or the big brother figure. His age, guys. I've learned this enough. If I learned a few things, I hope I have over the years. One is that there is absolutely a great variable as to how guys age in any sport. Some guys age gradually. Some guys suddenly something happens and almost overnight or in a very short period of time they go from being productive and viable to being struggling. I don't know. Is at the age where some guys have lost it at that point, and if that's the case, that's a big problem because he was obviously a key component in this team. So. Once again, there was a little resurgence against the Pelicans. Maybe we'll be looking back. Maybe when we revisit at the All-Star break or so, we say, you remember that Pelicans game when a couple of good things happened, and one of them, and maybe that's going to be the breakthrough. But you make a good point, and I just don't have anything to add to it other than to point out that just beware, folks, that they don't all age the same way.
How about for Hayward? Again, a guy that's come up a little bit as we've been talking here, but there are a lot of people out there that are looking at him and incredibly disappointed, and I don't really care about that. I said from the very beginning I'm not even going to really attempt to evaluate him until, February. Give him half a season after not playing for a year. It was a gruesome injury. Let's see what he looks like. And there have been bright spots, and quite frankly, I've been more impressed with his defense to this point than his offense, and I think even fully healthy and back, a lot of people are going to feel that way about him because that's the type of player he is. There's a reason that Stevens has described him in the past as Al Horford, wing Al Horford, basically. Does a lot of little things really, really well, and you don't think of him as your typical all-star max player, blah, blah, blah. But how long do you give Hayward to work his way back before you actually worry that he's never going to be the same player again?
I'm with you, and all I can sum up, as long as he needs exercise patience. That was a very tough injury, and that's that. He's young enough to still have a good bounce back and resilience in the body. The body is he's 27. I'm going to exercise the maximum amount of patience, and so I think we're on the same page with him. It was unrealistic to expect him to go back and immediately be the all-star that he was, we see the flashes of what he can be and what he was and what he can do. And I'm not worried. I'm not yet worried about him. I'm frankly more concerned about some other people than I am about Gordon Hayward in the long run. I think Gordon Hayward will be fine in the long run.
All right, let's mix in one last question that I got from Twitter, and got a whole bunch on Twitter, and a lot of the different topics we've already talked about. But I'll mix in this one last question from Hans, which is, what's the ceiling for this team as currently constructed and you see it? Does the start of the season change your expectations that they have a shot at taking down the Warriors?
Yeah. I mean, of course, how could it not? Quarter of the season and 500? Stop it. This is so far from what we thought. Instead of 11 and 10 as we speak, I would have expected. I would have thought 14-7 would have been a disaster. Would have been oh my God, what's the matter with these guys? I would have been much more along the lines of 16-5 with this team, or 17-4, or even better. At this point last year, they were winning 16, 17 in a row. So I'm concerned. And the other thing is, all the praise that was heaped on the Celtics at the expense of the Raptors. Shame on everybody. First of all, I never bought I always bought the Raptors. I know that their biggest problem was they couldn't beat Cleveland. All right, these things happen. Other than that, folks, they were better than the Celtics last year, and Celtics couldn't beat them last year. And the Raptors added one of the top 5 individual talents and players. Just basketball players. He's a pure, incredible basketball player, Kawhi Leonard. And they upgraded from a pretty good player, an all-star level player, to a great player, a top-of-the-line player, and he's walked and fit right in with them. And plus, Ibaka is playing as well as he's ever played. And the big variable with them was the coach. Nobody, let's face it, you didn't know who Nick Nurse was. Don't lie to me, right?
No, I mean,
you knew his name.
Couldn't put him out of a lineup.
I knew who he was. Believe me, the only reason was that by a pure circumstance, I happened to be in Des Moines, Iowa, a number of years ago on an appearance the day he was named coach of their D-League team. So, otherwise, I didn't know he existed on this earth. And then I lost track of him. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then, oh my God, Nick Nurse is the new coach of the Raptors. And you wondered, I thought that was perhaps a big mistake, that they hired this. Well, it looks like they're taking the Nick Nurse very well. Anyway, the answer is the question. Damn right. I don't think I feel a lot less confident. I never thought they were going to beat the Warriors anyway. My goal was to get to the finals and lose gracefully.
Yeah, I was right there with it. So we'll cap with this then related to that. From Kawhi's Raptors to Giannis's Bucks, who are playing very well. The Sixers, as you said, with Jimmy Butler, they've been great since his arrival. And, of course, the Celtics with what they are on paper compared to what they are maybe in our heads. And we're early, but not so early as we talk because, as we've said a number of times, a quarter of the way through the year at this point. What's the Eastern Conference hierarchy look like to you?
Well, right now, Toronto, Philly, Milwaukee, I think I draw a line right away. That's the hierarchy. For me right now. Am I forgetting somebody? I don't think so.
No.
Indiana, I respect. They're in the next tier. There's really nobody else. Detroit's playing better than people think, but they're not in that next. They're not in that top level. No, I think that you're clear. And Boston is struggling to fit into the next tier, and that's it. There's a lot of parity at that next tier. With the Charlottes and Orlandos and all that. And by the way. No, they're not there yet, but suddenly the Knicks, they found something. Fizdale looks like he's going to be a good coach for them. But so that's your hierarchy. Toronto, clearly, Philly, and Philly's not done. They know that they need they got to find one more shooter because the Fultz is obviously a disaster and
unbelievable.
Whether it's moved or not. He's a disaster. Simmons is what he is, and you need another shooter. And but boy, Butler has walked right in there, And Embiid he takes your breath away at times. Embiid, plus, don't you love him? And let's face it, he's fun to have around.
He's great on social media, great in general.
Best big man addition socially since Shaq, young Shaq.
Absolutely.
Yeah, great. Good to have him around. So anyway, there's your answer. In Milwaukee, oh my God, the big guy, and it's not, and Middleton is probably the best kept secret in the league. And Bledsoe, is in the prime of his career, and so they're, the Celtics barely got by them. last year. And then any given night, Indiana can. Any given night, Indiana's a pretty good team. And I'm just going to put a pitch in for one of my. I loved him from the minute I laid eyes on him in college. And I admit I'm totally biased because I loved his father. I love Sabonis.
Oh, God. Did you see that Arvydas is on Twitter now?
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, he just in the last couple of days created a Twitter account, yeah.
The father was one of the, I would have given anything to see the father at age 18. They said he was Bill Walton with a three-point shot. I saw him later on. He put on the greatest pivot clinic I ever saw in the Olympics one year. And the kid is smart and just fundamentally beautifully sound, and he's found a home now. I'm glad.
I'll tell you this, I wasn't even thinking about it until you triggered it there. Just earlier today, I was goofing around on Twitter, and I saw someone had tweeted out a story, like a Reddit story about Arvydas Sabonis that Brian Grant, his old teammate, had told somewhere about their days in Portland, and Grant was saying this one night out they went out partying, a whole bunch of them, or maybe he went out with Arvydas' friends or something like that, and they were taking shots and they were going to do a toast, and Grant's sort of goofing around, looking to wherever Arvydas slaps him across the face. And Brian Grant says, "What was that?" And he just looks at him. He says, "When we're toasting, you always look me in the eye. Always."
Well, don't mess with a tough Lithuanian, I'll tell you.
Yeah, but you don't mess with Arvydas Sabonis.
Do you agree with me on that, the declension of teams? Would you put Milwaukee right up there with them right now or not?
I would right now. And obviously that's what I asked you to do. So yes, I agree with you. I'm sort of still skeptical of the long term. Just because maybe I don't totally buy in on the coach, but those players that you mentioned. I mean, the Greek Freak is unbelievable, and Middleton I've wanted the Celtics to acquire for years, and Bledsoe is I just like the attitude and swagger about him when he actually buys in. So yeah, I like that team, and it's almost shocking to me that we're having this conversation without even mentioning Washington. But obviously that's a dumpster fire.
I had it in
there.
the back of my head. I was forgetting somebody, and every once in a while that backcourt goes off, as they did last night with overcoming 54 by Harden. They gave up. They put up 68 themselves. Right. Two of them.
Right.
Yeah, that's that whole story about their relationship and the dynamics and
everything.
Everybody in the world is waiting for Beal to get traded, and the can't trade Wall obviously. So no, it's interesting. Yeah, right. It's a couple years ago I would have Washington looked like they would be the team that we're talking about with Toronto. Toronto is now, but it never happened.
No, it's an interesting fall from grace there. They're eventually going to have to blow that thing up. But I don't want to keep you anymore. This has been great. Always a pleasure for me when we get to catch up and chat, especially when we're talking basketball. And look, I mean, we've tried to figure out all the answers for this team. It's just they need to go out and follow suit, Bob.
People ask me around town, and of course, and I just say I know it sounds so simplistic.
Just figure it out.
Need to play better. That's all.
Yeah.
And I think you hit it. Lay it on the line. Then they haven't, and maybe I want to let's schedule a date for the All-Star game and see if we go back to the night of the 26th of November when they actually look like themselves a little bit against the Pelicans.
Let's do it right around the All-Star game. I'll have you back on. We'll do it. And in the meantime, if anyone is unfamiliar or hasn't been listening to Bob Ryan's podcast, also part of the CLNS Media Network, I encourage you to go out and do so. Anything big with that show coming up that you want to tease? By the way,
we're regrouping, but I've got some good hopes and plans for the winter.
Excellent. Well, I'm looking forward to that, and in the meantime, always enjoy having you on here. Bob, thanks so much.
Terrific. Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure, too. Bye-bye.
So there you go. Bob Ryan, legend. I love the man. I do. All right, another back-to-back on the way for the Green Friday and Saturday versus Cleveland and in Minnesota, and then things slow down. Possibly another midweek show on the way for us next week. This show is brought to you by Action Heat. That's actionheat.com/Boston, or use the coupon code Boston at checkout to save 20%. The show also brought to you by The Athletic. Go to theathletic.com/CelticsBeat. Get a monthly subscription for less than $3 a month. Thanks again to Bob. Again, subscribe. I tell you all the time, go to iTunes, Stitcher, follow me on Twitter. It's been great. Always a pleasure for me when we get to catch up and chat, especially when we're talking basketball. And look, I mean, we've tried to figure out all the answers for this team. It's just they need to go out and follow suit, Bob.
People ask me around town, and of course, and I just say I know it sounds so simplistic.
Just figure it out.
Need to play better. That's all.
Yeah.
And I think you hit it. Lay it on the line. Then they haven't, and maybe I want to, let's schedule a date for the All-Star game and see if we go back to the night of the 26th of November when they actually look like themselves a little bit against the Pelicans.
Let's do it. Right around the All-Star game, I'll have you back on. We'll do it. And in the meantime, if anyone is, unfamiliar or hasn't been listening to Bob Ryan's podcast, also part of the CLNS Media Network, I encourage you to go out and do